I've asked, there's not a legal reason why we can't charge it up front if we're clear about it, what it's for. We've looked at that. It's, for me personally, it's more of a pragmatic side of it. And like I say, it comes back to this whole question at the end of the day. We're not managing to recover as much as we want. There's a whole lot of admin side that needs to go into these processes. And when you look at it, and we have done a comparative work with other councils, and I would have to say that overall, our fees are not unreasonable compared with others in the Canterbury region.
I think you answered the question there. I was going, because there was the word arbitrary was used in terms of how you come up with these things. It was just unfortunate they picked the plan change one, because that does seem massive. I think the last time we had a plan change significant hearing was the Downs in Geraldine back 8 years ago, and it's massive. Like it is. And I bet you it's been sitting there in that time zone for that time until you guys got on top of it and looked at it. So the rigour that you put across it also involved looking at other fees and charges and lining us with other councils and things like that. And that's the key to it. And having pulled out the fact that if you put examples into on the website that says this activity around this is the average, this is what we're looking at, so it's really transparent. People know that when people go in and get their paid for consultants, they're telling them what the reality is, and they've got to come back for them to deserve their big money, have a go at you, and there's always that tension and drama, and that's why it's always going to be there. But I'm just comfortable that from what you've said and the calibre of the people we have here, that this wasn't arbitrary and that you've put some real rigour around it. So again, there's that tension that we've asked you to come back here and make sure that you are cutting your cloth appropriately, so that we are looking after all our ratepayers, not just the developers and those people. Thank you.
Thank you. That's pretty much summed it up. I think if you could just look at me and say we're in general principle agreement that we need to recover between 90 and 100%. The costs need to land where they are, and this is why they've done this piece of work, so it doesn't fall on the general ratepayer. So I think probably with the feedback that you've heard around transparency and fairness, that's probably enough to move forward. So is everyone comfortable with that on that one? Yeah. Cool. So I just want to move. Sorry, Councillor Scott. Apologies.
I'm just questioning what you said. Sorry, because I think that's going against what is being proposed. So the annual plan statement of proposal is to recover 100%, where our revenue and financing policy is to recover 80 to 90%. So we
line those up.
Those two don't line up. I think that's the whole point of this, is the confusion.
Yeah, no, and the reality is it's probably lined up even less so in reality, and so it's to get back to that sweet spot, isn't it? And what is that sweet spot, to your point, 80 to 100? Or so revenue and finance policy technically sits with an LTP process, and so we can still say to officers that we want you to aim to be not between 90 and 100. Is that fair? Or does it need to comply with? The reality is it's going to be a hard one to hit, and it's not an exact science anyway.
I think the revenue and financing policy is the foundational document for the LTP, and it's probably more straightforward if we aim for that 80%, 80 to 90, and then that aligns us with the LTP and the revenue and financing policy. That's my opinion, Your Worship.
No, well, that's fine if we aim towards the higher side of between 80 and 100.
Go for the point.
Yeah. No. Cool. So we're all comfortable with that. Thank you. Good point, Councillor Scott. So I just want to work through those other submitters today. I think we've covered Melissa, etc., with the conversation around with Rooney Group. Jerry Littenberg touched on educational rates, rebates. I think that's something we can pick up. And it would be interesting to it's a bit of a hard one because people are presenting their own financials, so we don't know who's not there. So the key thing is that we are marketing that, if you like. Council rents, etc. We can pick that up with LTP. Where else have we got? CCS disability. Andrew, for you, streets accessibility audit. Those are sort of the things that we are doing when we renew footpaths, etc. Anyway, aren't they? And around disability and what's fit for purpose.
Yeah, Your Worship, that's correct. Yeah, we're always doing the accessibility audits. And in fact, Daniel, our road safety coordinator, actually goes out on mobility scooters and talks to these groups to assess them. Yeah, but you've got to recognise that we can't do every footpath and every crossing point. So we are focusing on the high use ones as the first priority, and we'll work our way down over time.
Where we're doing a renewal and we know there's an issue, we'll look to deal with that at the time.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Anything you want to dig into, Councillor Booth from McGregor Erosion? I just want to pick up on Nadine's submission in regard to, there's a few things there. CL extension policy, our budget per year is minimal. I forget what it is, but it's not a lot, is it, Andrew, is it?
$330,000 per annum.
Yeah, and are we caught up? Because when we did our Rari back road, we used some funds ahead of time, and when was that? There was a year or so ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, basically, council's policy on seal extensions is that any new seal extension has to be council approved.
Yeah.
And the $330,000 is a provision that is in the budget should you choose to approve one on a case-by-case basis, or alternatively, the residents of the road come up with 50% of the cost, and then we tap into the fund then. So.
Yeah, so there was a couple of things that were picked up. One around the safety, that bus stop. I think that's something we can do. To the point made, same families have been in that region for 3 years. That's something I think we should probably move ahead on. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, the instructions already gone through to the contractor.
Brilliant, thank you. And then a couple of things, I think maybe we, at some point, I know Susie's sitting in the background, if we could, I know we talked about this when we did a Rari back road. I think we had a view of the sort of top 10 that may be, understanding that, there is no money coming from Waka Kotahi in the short term on this sort of stuff. But I think a key one that Nadine brought up for me is around that transparency. What does a matrix look like to decide how we do seal extension if we are going to in the future? So maybe that's something we can pick up within the seal extension policy. Just can we extend on that? What are your thoughts, Mr. Dixon?
Basically, the seal extension policy adopted by council has a matrix in there on how to seal. It's based on the traffic volumes, number of affected houses, and economic consideration. So that is there. But of course, at the moment, it's okay. We're not doing an active seal extension program. So we're not doing prioritisation of roads because there is no program to develop that for. And prioritisation, or traffic volumes are changing all the time. You might have a major dairy farm open up or a quarry operation, and suddenly the traffic changes quite immensely. So, yeah, but we're not doing the list as such. We used to do a list, as some of you may recall, and that does have its own problems, because what happened is that people would see their road on a list and think, right, it's going to be 5 years when I get to my road. That comes up, and of course we don't have the funding, and then they get upset. Well, why isn't my road sealed? And it was on your list. We try to tell them that things have changed is difficult. Yeah, just the other point I make with unsealed roads, just point out that basically the level of service that we're offering on unsealed roads is based on the funding that's available, and we basically have $660 per kilometre per year for unsealed road maintenance. That's it. So Rolling Ridges Road is $1,450 per year is all they're spending. Take the subsidy off that, which is about 50% of it. That means that the ratepayers in the 9 houses are probably only paying $80 a year for the maintenance of that Rolling Ridges Road. So that's the level of service. It's pretty good value. We are one of the lowest in the country when it comes to maintenance of these roads.
And there again, probably long-term plan conversation. We can pick that up again within that. Is everyone comfortable with that? Is there any more actions from today's conversation that you'd like to see? Sorry, Councillor Booth.
I was just going to ask a question. In terms of the amount of times that we get asked to do some form of dust suppression in these circumstances, what does it look like? Because I know it used to come in wearing the other hat, we'd have people with dodgy trucks going out and doing a wee bit of diesel oil or old oil, cooking oils, all sorts of stuff, and then they'd say this has just been done on a road. Obviously, there's a whole new, obviously type of product being used. What is the average for that type of thing to be asked of council for dust suppression?
During the summer, we'd get a few, wouldn't we? Yeah, maybe Susie better answer that. She's more at the coalface. Yeah.
Yeah, afternoon. So we probably only get, actually this is the only one. This is the only road that we've had dust complaints on officially through the CRM process. Obviously, 750 kilometres of unsealed road, there are houses, there have been developments, there's more migration of people moving onto lifestyle blocks where there's still a large number of trucks using the area. It's unfortunate. I myself also live on an unsealed road, so I know the frustration. But yeah, there's just not the available funding to go in and do the work that we'd need to do for dust suppressants. They're short-term fix, high cost, so the net present value calculations on those are really poor. So the ability to do that large scale across the network would be astronomical cost to council and short-term because as we said in the submission, we can't actually grade it once it's been done. So what happens now, if somebody approaches us, we say, yes, it can be done. You need to comply with ECAN requirements. You also need to make sure it's applied safely through a contractor that we use, temporary traffic management. Let us know when it's applied so we can keep the grader off it as long as possible. However, when the road becomes some condition that we need to grade, we will grade it at basically no risk to council, and the cost of reapplying the dust suppressant would again be on the adjacent landowner or resident.
Ballpark figure in terms of per kilometre over a reasonable economy of scale for application of dust suppressant?
I don't actually have those figures, because we haven't. We don't. We just stay well away from it.
Good.
Yeah.
Easy. Thank you.
That's it.
Andrew, just for clarity, so we don't really have an active list at the moment, and we look for the ratepayers to pay half before we'd actually look at doing anything. Is that correct, just for clarity?
Yes, that's correct. There's in our accordance with our policy at this stage, yeah.
So do we get back to the submitter and tell them that, or do they have to watch this? I'm just conscious people come with a whole lot of questions. We're satisfied with the answer. How do they, in this particular case, get the answer?
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Normally what we do with these is officers send back a brief comment about an update, and we sort of try and evaluate what the best way of doing that is, because there is a bit of a wrap-up of this, and I think with particularly in long term and those who come in and submit, we do actually go back and give a brief note, because we've only got a handful here. So we would normally go back to them on that. And note also when we do a bit of a wrap, when the annual plan is adopted as well, would be another forum through which that advice comes. But I think you're talking about the targeted communication back to the submitter. Yes, which we would do via a written form.
The submitter themselves acknowledged that that policy in their submission on one of the last slides, that they could pay half, the residents could pay half, and it would be done. But yeah, just for the other record too, we have had public meetings out there. Last time, Councillor Lyon was very active in attending those meetings, and we explained the same situation.
Yeah, I've been out there too, and there was some safety things that we did do. I can't remember, Susie, you might be able to speak to it, but I know we did make some changes, didn't we?
Yes, correct. So there was some concerns around a particular bend, so we put some curve advisory signage up and also put some edge marker posts up. And just noting that, throughout the country, the net present value calculations or benefit cost ratio doesn't actually bring in safety into those calculations, which is, part of our policy. So there is no safety aspect in there at this stage. So we do try and respond to those ones as much as we can, but again, it comes down to the funding we have available, and we do push Waka Kotahi hard. Andrew mentioned before that we are one of the lowest costs through the country. We bring that up regularly when we ask for more funding from Waka Kotahi, and we will continue to do so to show that we are really cost effective in those areas to try and get extra, but they're in a constrained funding round as well.
And that was,
There has only been one crash reported on that road. There is, I guess, some evidence that there might have been some possible near misses, but of course they're not recorded in the system, and it's the police that record all crashes, we don't. So we just have to rely on the data.
yeah, so I guess if 25% of all crime is reported, then that might give you an indication. So, but it's hard to go off anecdotal feedback, isn't it? But I guess the submitter did make some good points around safety and dust, but those aren't things that are part of the consideration. So, yeah. Okay, sorry, Councillor Oliver.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Your Worship. Just a quick question. Obviously, with more regular sudden downpour events, are we thinking of a bigger picture that we do need to obviously look at funding of our shingle roads? When I think of downpour events, I think of Peel Forest recently, and those sort of downpour events. Should we definitely be looking forward to needing to up that spend on those shingle roads and that in the future, because it's going to be ongoing.
Councillor Oliver, through your worship. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's something we need to look at, but it will be probably a consideration in the next long-term plan.
Yeah, I think that's something we do. It'll be well noted, and we'll pick that up. Yep. Now, is there anything from the submitters today, Councillor Piddington?
Yeah, just getting back to the lifeboat and Dave Fraser. Who owns the lifeboat? Do the Civic Trust? Does anyone know?
I believe we own it on behalf of the
Council
city.
owns the lifeboat.
Yeah.
Well, could I make a suggestion as we own it that we get regular reports, because I'm sure there's funding available, like at Pleasant Point they built their little shelter for the fire engine. Surely if it's of that historic value, we should be proactive in either setting up a group, and I'm happy to be on it, so we can move this thing forward, so Dave doesn't have to come back in another 8 years and ask us what we did.
Yeah, look, and it's for the variety of reasons. It's obviously been kicking around to the points made earlier, and I'll go to Councillor Booth in a moment. But I think this current group, and Bill's liaising with them, but to your point is how do we keep Dave up to date and Council up to date? So maybe we request sort of a 3-monthly update on the lifeboat as the project moves forward. And to your point, what requests for assistance should Council contribute as well? Councillor Burt.
Yeah, I just remember seeing it when it did have some traction. I don't know if you saw Councillor Pillington. They got an architect to do a sort of a build of what it would look like, glassed and what have you, and it's displayed prominently down on the bay because it is a key part of our history and all that sort of thing. And back then, if we'd pushed the button on, we wouldn't be talking here now. It would have cost us 2/5 of, and now it's going to be holy moly. But yeah, I think we need to find someone who's recently just come off a successful project to raise money for something like a playground or something, I don't know, and get that guy to pull a group together and maybe get some traction going.
Yeah, I think the key thing is we've got a community group that want to move forward on it, so I think we'll be in a pretty good position. But to your point, we'll get some good feedback back to Council. Councillor Jackson.
They have asked me for some guidance, so I'm going to the next meeting.
Perfect. You could be our Council liaison.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so from the submitters this morning, is there anything that we've missed that anyone wants to delve into? I think I've covered my questions, but has anyone else got anything? Just give you a moment to look through your notes. Dealing with that, but yeah, more holistically, yeah, for sure. Councillor Booth first.
Just that old chestnut about bringing in-house all our project works and things like that. It seems to be doing the rounds at the moment and everything, and it's easy to pick up the phone and see the last surviving councils that are still in some way involved in it. But I don't know, is it going to be a thing that we need to do some work on and give an example of why it's not a thing, or it could be, or on what level? Because I mean, for us to suddenly gear up for that, based on everything else we're spending at the moment, we couldn't do it. And even just getting the staff, no matter how well we treat them and with health and safety and everything, it just wouldn't be a thing. And then we've got the policies around washing our own face over it in relation to being competitive, openly and transparently competitive against people to come in and tender for it, and there's all those tensions as well.
Yeah, no, it's complex. My thoughts on it, I know that we're doing a workshop maybe in June or July around some contractor consultancy. What are some of the opportunities? So I think that's one of the stages, and then I know we're doing some other work within Parks and Rec and review in that space, and then so I think it's over the next sort of year and couple of years, and then considerations as contracts expire. I mean, some of the contracts that we have in place for certain services are of a considerable time frame, so it's just these sort of cost considerations become BAU almost, and we get a bit of a timeline on what we, so it's just stepping through it. That's my thoughts on it, but it's not something we can fix overnight. There's no silver bullet, would be my thoughts. Councillor Booth.
Yeah, I'd just like to note the written submission by Juliet Crawford on behalf of the Friends of the Argentine Art Gallery and her their dismay at that the house gallery has been closed since 2017, I think it is. So yeah, look, perhaps I mean Nigel might have some more information on it, but that is very frustrating.
Oh yeah. Oh look, it is, Councillor Booth. If the plan proceeds, then there is funding for us to go and do the work if we can find someone to tender, because we did tender for it, didn't get anybody to do it. We put the funding in. So if we get a tender and the funding is approved, then it can be undertaken in the next financial year. So it is there, ready to go if the plan, it's in the plan to be done anyway.
So will that happen within the next 3 months?
I think if the funding's approved, we'd be able to go out and re-tender the project. I would have thought within the next 3 months. We've done most of the work, but we've got to be able to make sure we've got the money, that if somebody says they can, that we've got the money to go and pay them to do it at the estimated cost. So that so the tender can be done. Whether they would have started in the next 3 months, given that there's 1 month of this financial year and the next financial year, 2 months, but we would be able to commence the process of tendering for the work. Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah.
Councillor Piddington.
I guess this sets the rates, and it's my old chestnut, and I'd have given the staff some warning. On page 91, it says, in regards to consultants, the majority of council use are a part of defined project in the annual long-term plan. How do we know it's a majority? We've just heard planning relies heavily on consultants. We've got a consultant running the facilities at the moment out of Wellington. There's other consultants walking around. I'm just not sure how rigorous we are on this, because they obviously come at a large cost. So I'd like to know how we know it's a majority and what numbers we used.
So through you, Your Worship, and my colleague here might want to step in as well, the majority of our infrastructure completed
work does have a contract attached to it, and so a lot of those figures. But then we break down by business unit over the time. Some of those we can't go into here because it's commercially sensitive, depending on what type of contract it's for. But we use a budget that's appropriate for whatever the service we may be looking for. So, for example, we pay Bancor, which provides us financial advice. They're considered a professional fee. We also have different things like we may get advice on earthquake-prone buildings, for example, and seek that contract. That's something that we wouldn't keep in-house as a resource, and we would contract that work in and out. So it's all budgeted, and then anything that's on top of that going into the infrastructure projects, we don't keep a separate tally of that. That's included in the project cost that normally the infrastructure or the property teams are dealing with. But we do keep the set budgets for each business unit and run according to those. If they have to go over or under, because we operate within a whole fiscal envelope, there are those things that sometimes do occur. Did that make sense?
Yeah, but basically, all of our capital works projects are predominantly designed by consultants. We don't have in-house design services team. We may do some very simple curb and channel replacements or so a small intersection, but anything beyond that, we do not have design engineers who can produce that stuff. So all that work is put out to consultants. In addition, you've got all the resource consenting requirements these days. So you've got archaeological assessments, ecology, cultural assessments are coming into it. So there is a lot of money, but we have to use these specialists to do this. That's the thing. We would not be able to even get the in-house resources to cover that sort of thing. And as Trudy said, earthquake-prone buildings is a very specialist area.
You understand that, but there's still a lot of consultants wandering around within this organisation that aren't doing that. And I just wondered if we had a number.
So we have numbers within the budget of the LTP, and it is a higher number because we're doing the district plan review expenditure. And overall, we're looking at 1.7 for the district plan review, for example, but overall the total budget is around the 5.5 mark. But that includes all of those different contractors. That's not just contractors we may have in fulfilling a role that we have to still deliver or we can't operate. So, for example, if we had to get a health and safety contractor in, if we had extended leave of an employee or something happened, there are some roles we must keep delivering. We can't cease the service.
And that there are some functions that we have to outsource as well, like, asset revaluations. It has to be done independently. We have our asset management system.
Understand that, Andrew. I've made my point.
Okay.
Look, picking up on that point, and it's a national conversation. One, because National saying they're going to save X amount of $1 million in the central government coffers on consultants and what have you. So I think where we miss as a council is that transparency over what individuals are used for. So I think, and if you go back to LTP, I remember having the conversation with elected members at the time saying, well, some of these things we aren't going to be able to deliver in-house. This is what we're signing off, and we're delegating authority back to the team to go out and deliver. And the question is, to have better transparency for ourselves and for the public, what sort of reporting on these things do you want to come back to council? And I think that might be quite helpful to understand where the pressure points are from a governance point of view. To Paul's point, or Mr. Cooper's point earlier this morning around the cost, this afternoon that we've just talked around the planning, etc. At what point do we, in 3 months or 6 months, and I understand it's more reporting for the officers, but at 6 months, do we review those fees and have a real hard look at it, and we understand, well, actually, we're operating at 80 to 90%. Do we need to make any tweaks? Are we on the right track? Some of those sort of things. So I think, some of those mechanisms we can put in so there's better accountability back through to elected members, and if we show that we've got that accountability, then that's going to flow through to ratepayer as well. So I think that's sort of a piece of work that we can probably pick up. There will be some extra officer time, obviously, but I think key to the theme of being transparent, that's probably a good way to go, and I'm sure that's getting some nods, so that's pretty good. Any other, but good point, and I think that's the way to move forward on it. So any further questions from any of the submitters written as well? Is there anything that I want to make sure we get everything out so everyone feels that they're heard, and then we'll move through to the decisions of the day. Sorry, Councillor Oliver.
Just want to quick, a couple of submitters there came back to prioritisation of projects and how we manage that going forward. Obviously, we don't have the ability, by the look of it, to fund all those projects now because we've got the extra costs and the tip and the car park and a few other things. I'm just wondering, doesn't seem to be any sort of priority of what should take over what and what should be done in what sort of order. I'm wondering whether that could be something that we could be looking at going forward, of what's urgent, what's not, and all those sorts of things. It came up a couple of times in the submissions.
I guess that's something we'd have to look at, and the priorities, what is a health and safety issue, what is a regulatory requirement, versus what is nice to have. Yeah, and at the end of the day, council would have to make some of those decisions.
Yeah, and probably in there again, I don't want to point everything to the LTP, but that's some of those priorities. And the problem is at LTP we have a timeline, and then as we know, very quickly it moves. So, but I think that's probably the appropriate time as well to do some of that work. And there's the vertical build projects that everyone's really conscious about, stadium, art galleries, theatres, and those sort of things. But then there's all the low-lying projects that sit within the team and just happen, and we see a fence at the botanical gardens, and I know people picked through the submissions, people picked up on that, or why you're prioritising that when you should be doing something, but that's actually sat within an asset management plan probably for best part of a decade, and it's just a renewal, and so it's at what level you want to do it. Councillor Piddington.
Just following on from Councillor Oliver, and a couple of people have tackled me about the Sophia Street car park. If we're telling everyone it's safe to use, and there doesn't appear to be the demand, why are we rushing it? Someone put to me who's not into sport, the stadium's the same. Why do we have to rush to do the ones that we say are safe within the timing? I'd like to have some philosophy behind why we have to rush some of these things and not rush some of these things, if you know what I mean. Because we're bottlenecking, we're at a bottleneck, and perhaps the car park could wait 6 or 7 years before we do it. If there's no demand and it's safe, why are we putting ourselves through it? I don't know. I just think we need a discussion around those things.
Yeah, look, and I think the car park, it's we're budgeting for a worst case scenario, aren't we? And it might be, I don't know where we're at with that, but it might be that we don't have to do anything. And I think you raise a good point. But whereas we know the Peel Forest landfill is got some urgency. Yeah. But point well made. So anything else from submissions? We want to make sure we covered all that. Nothing you've got highlighted that you want to talk about, and then we'll move towards recommendations. And so is there anything further officers would like to add at this stage?
I think, Your Worship, just in terms of, and we haven't been able to fully model it, but we have identified that the costs of the carbon credits, if you like, will be lower than was forecast. So we haven't been able to model it right through, but it's lower than we forecast by a reasonable amount of money. And so the question is that if you, in terms of that, the effect is in the order of about 1% or slightly more of rates, and I think some direction from you on that would be, do you wish us at this point to reduce effectively that rate increase? But if we do, then you're still borrowing some debt for the depreciation, or do you want us to keep the rate increase the same and you reduce the borrowing level? So the model hasn't been done, it goes to a targeted rate, but we're talking in the order of about probably $800,000 that we've been able to hedge in terms of a saving by forward purchasing. So there is that there for you, but as I said, we haven't been able to model it through because of the time constraint. But some direction about savings, if you like, generally, and where that should go would be appreciated by officers.
Throw it to the floor. We can't call you the $1 million man, it's just $800,000 man, Councillor Booth, so there you go.
Still significant though, isn't it?
No, significant, massive amount of money. So,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think it may be an opportunity to get on the right side of the ledger for them to ensure that you're actually, because in the past they've been going up and we've been potentially not charging enough at the landfill to recover the full costs of what we've had to pay. So, well, I think you should take the saving, but also take the opportunity to get into a position where you are paying them forward, and you know actually what, and charge accordingly at the weigh station to cover the deficit, instead of buying them in at the end of the year once you've
I mean, we could buy some more. I think we've hedged out. We've estimated what our liability will be and hedged most of it, haven't we, Andrew?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. We've got, one more year of at the default value, and then hope the flare will kick in and we'll have a reduction in the number of credits that we have to buy. But we're not sure how much at this stage.
yeah, look, and there's a couple of things that reoccurring. One, waste over the weighbridge, and two, some of the fees sitting in planning that. I just feel that we shouldn't be waiting, a full year to review these fees and charges effectively. So, is there anything stopping us doing a half-yearly review on the likes of the weighbridge to make sure we do have that being on?
I'm not sure if I understand the question, to be honest.
So my question is, we basically look to cost recovery, and sometimes we get it wrong because we're setting fees and charges. Let's use the weighbridge on a tonnage of waste, and if we're getting it wrong, it takes us a year to catch back up. So my point is, can we, at a 6-monthly interval, review the costs that we've got associated with that? Cost to revenue, have we got it right, or do we need to increase that fee at a 6-monthly period?
There's certainly an option to review the fees and charges at the gate. On a 6-monthly basis, yes.
Yeah, my point is, let's just be a bit more nimble, agile on those, core fees, rather than having to do catch up all the time. We just want to charge the,
Whose responsibility is to ensure that those financial decisions are being taken at an appropriate time? Is that like the the financial officer, chief financial officer, who's generally got their fingers on the pulse? Who's it up to? Because really we should be sitting, as we're setting the rates and the charges now, we should know what they're going to be. So therefore, when we set them, we either hedge it now and lock that in, we know, or we review every 6 months. And whose decision is that is actively canvassing it?
So, through you, Your Worship, that sits with the activity or business unit managers, because they're the specialist that's running that activity and is responsible for creating their budget, reviewing their budget, making sure their fees and charges are adequate. Doing more regular than annual fees and charges review will take a little bit more time, because obviously it creates a special consultative process and it triggers additional work for other teams, enabling activity managers to do that. It's not to say we can't do it, it's to say as long as we're aware that it impacts other work within the system that we still have to deliver.
Look, I think the key thing is that if we see there's some risk where it's, and we need to do some catch up, that we see those through the numbers in a timely fashion so we can make changes. Because I'd rather go through a process and make changes rather than have to catch up another 6 months after the fact, personally.
So you're suggesting then that the 1% that we could potentially shave our increase by 1% because of that, or not quite?
No,
Through you, well, we've hedged because we've got to pay for the carbon. So we've hedged that. We have the credits now, so we've locked in that amount. And when we brought the budget in March, it was $80 a unit, was it? Because that was the price. But we've been able to secure it at an average of 57 or something like that, which means we've hedged our bets, if you like, and the saving on that 23, which is 40,000 units or whatever the amount is given us about 800,000 roughly. So you've sort of got a 1% which is available to either reduce your rate a bit or reduce your borrowings a bit, or a blended. You could say, well, half to reduce the rate and half to reduce the amount you borrow. And so you could do that. And generally, if we identify other savings, have you got some general direction for us about what to do with it as we go through? Because as we get closer to the end of the year, we get more certain about where we're going to land, what our starting position will be.
Okay, I guess on the other hand, as we're drawing debt down, we're going to be paying the new rate, which is 5.5 plus a 25 basis points, which is we're going to be up near 5.85% interest rate. So perhaps it might cover some of that stuff.
Well, it will, but we also have some hedging which is offsetting that quite well at the moment as well. So we're in the actual spread. We can have a look at that, but I don't think the spread between finance income received and finance what we're paying has changed materially for the amount we're borrowing in terms of the net interest cost, because we hedged about 80 million of debt. So we're doing okay on our hedging while that's going up at the moment.
Sorry, to follow on from there, I had to find my notes, still learning a bit about how the heck you set your rates. But so what I'm understanding from what Alan is saying and Bede is that the savings of the 800,000 does equate to over 1% rate reduction. So when we go through this next phase, will we model that for the 27th of June? So I'm just trying to understand how we actually will get to, at the moment we're proposing 12.5, but we've already identified 1% just through this simple transaction. So how do we actually progress to that next stage of this next remodelling in the next couple of weeks? Because I'm sure the community will say, yes, I want that 1%.
Through you, Your Worship, our team go away and pull that all together, and then that gets pulled through into the agenda for the 27th and gets made public, and it'll get shared then. Yes.
Like in a table or something simple, so we'll go, so we don't overcomplicate our wee brains here. It'll be in a table or something. Ready?
Of course, we can look at a table that could potentially clarify some of the savings and help people understand where the costs were coming from. Note to self.
I understand it and understand we're funding depreciation, which I don't agree with, but I think if there's savings, 85% of the submitters said, let's get the rates down. I don't think we can suddenly take 1% and magically spend it on debt or do something else. I mean, our community's hurting a wee bit, so I think whatever the number we come down to, it should sit there, not look for other places to spend any savings. I don't know what sort of message that would send.
Keep in mind that you're going to be paying interest on $200 million. So just that even if with that share that the bonds that we took at a low rate, it's probably still got a rate of around 4% averaged across the whole lot of debt. So that's interest we've never had to pay before, and that will only keep increasing.
but we've just had an explanation that is not in the following year that we're rating for. Yes, the following year, and I get it, and I get why you'd think that, Alan, but I'm just putting my social hat on for our community that have given us a clear message. And if we make savings, I think those savings should go to the ratepayer.
Yeah, and Councillor Pellington, I think your point is a good one. We've gone out and consulted at 12.5, and then, you know, the ratepayers expect us to look for savings. Taking to your point, Councillor Booth, I think those are real factors, but I think they're looking at not just reallocation of funds. So, but to move forwards, so we will go to recommendations on page 82. So we've got receives the summary of submissions and officers' comments in response to submissions, that's fine. Direct officers by endorsing the draft annual plan with or without amendment. So to that point, do we need to give some indication now in regard to that conversation we've just had?
Your Worship, that would be helpful if the sort of the sentiment of the room is that the savings are banked, so to speak, with a lower rate, then that's a direction we can take and bring back to you, by all means. We haven't modelled through, so we don't know the exact number, but it will be lower by an amount because we've banked those. That is money, but it's to a targeted rate, I emphasise that, but it is money that we don't have to collect because we've already covered that estimated liability in the next year.
Cool. 3 direct officers on any other decisions. I think that's probably been picked up with commentary today. And then 4 is directs the Chief Executive to prepare the final annual plan for 27th of June. So the question is, goes to point 2, do you want to make with or without amendment? And I'm happy to take a mover from the floor, and then we'll block those 4 together with that amendment, either for that reduction or not.
You're looking for a mover for points 1, 2, 3, 4 with the amendment regarding of what we just spoke
Yeah,
about.
either amendment or no amendment. Yep.
Amendment with, I would support them with the rate, proposed rate decrease from the carbon credits that we're saving.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as I understand it, Your Worship, Councillor Parker's moving that the amendment is that we model in the rate decrease from the funds saved on the carbon credits effectively.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So that will be picked up in the fees and charges.
It'll be picked up in the targeted rate mostly, but quite a number of people pay that targeted rate, don't they, Mr. Dixon?
Yes, there's quite a substantial amount of rural people actually receive the curbside collection service. So it is only those who actually get the curbside collection that will paying the rate.
Get the benefit.
But it is a large proportion of ratepayers.
It's a large proportion, and we are looking for other savings as well, and it's noting that if we identify them, they're to be put to reduce the rate rather than leave it as it is what I'm hearing.
I'm very comfortable with that moving. Yeah.
Cool. Mover, Councillor Parker, thank you. Can I have, yes, no, you comment? Councillor Scott.
Just also making sure that the amendment reflects our conversations around the proposed fees and charges under our RMA that we had just had that whole conversation before, because we had proposed changes to that, didn't we? Yes.
Yeah. So I don't think that needs to necessarily be in the resolution, but are you comfortable with the direction?
Sorry, I'm just making sure that.
No, that's right. That's a good point, Councillor Scott. Are you comfortable with the direction you got from?
The direction being to be more transparent in terms of our website and tell school and then review it in 6 months' time as the numbers where they may.
No, and also our making sure our finance.
Are you talking?
Yes.
90%.
Yes, reflects.
Yeah, which is part of the policy anyway. But
So through you, Your Worship, the policy, the fees and charges are scoped to land within the revenue and financing policy as set out in the long-term plan.
Correct, because the current proposal was not that. The current proposed fees is 100% of the cost recovery. So we're talking about 89 to 90% to reflect our financing and whatever that policy was called. Sorry, I've lost my notes. The financing revenue, because that's what all those submitters were saying, is that they don't talk to each other. So I'm just making sure that we are on the same page with that. Because at the moment, our current statement of proposal does not reflect our finance and revenue policy.
Is there a level of ambiguity in there? Is it saying we will collect 100% of our costs incurred that are being charged? So what we're saying is that we're recovering only 80 to 90%, but we want to recover 100% of everything that we're charging. So that's two completely different concepts. So it could be worded right if you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, Councillor Booth, the numbers that we've done, we're working towards 80 to 90% recovery of the costs of consenting activity and those CME or compliance monitoring and enforcement activities associated with it. So that's what we're aiming for, and that's in line with our revenue and financing policy. It may be misleading in terms of how it's worded in the schedule. Maybe that's something that we can look at, making it more absolutely crystal clear. Rep.
Those submissions are all referring to this proposal that's on our website.
Yeah.
So it doesn't.
Along with the revenue and financing policy, yeah.
This one that needs to be.
Yeah, we need to align with that because that's one of the foundational documents that informs the LTP, and that's what we should be aligned with. Yeah.
And if I can be of service through you, Your Worship, thank you, Councillor. The LTP policies are being currently reviewed and ready for it. And one of the notes that I've been busily taking have been about the most major piece of work, which will be our revenue and financing policy. It is set at the moment to be 80 to 90%, and I understand here that you're giving us direction to say we need to move closer towards having a user pay models, as Paul says, that finds the sweet spot that we're looking for.
Perfect. Comfortable with that?
I think, Your Worship, it might be just helpful for us to note that the fees and charges were modelled on the long-term plan revenue and financing policy. If we just note that, so that when we come back later, there's no ambiguity or uncertainty to address the valid issue raised by Councillor Scott. We just note here that the revenue and financing policy was what they were modelled to, and that is 80 to 90%. I think that will help when we come and approve them in a month's time.
Cool, I think you've got that recorded.
So the motion that I'm proposing, are we adding a 0.5 in that, or are we leaving that tied up with 1 to 4?
I don't necessarily think, I think it's been picked up in the minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't actually think we need to, if you're comfortable with that. So we're still going to move. Councillor Parker, do we get a second? Councillor Piddington, thank you. Any further discussion? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Brilliant. So that is the last piece of business, isn't it? It is. Yes. So thank you, everyone. Lots of work in that process as usual. So I appreciate all the work the officers have put into that, and thank everyone for their time today, and meeting closed. Thank you.